If I were an elected official, I would be calling for eminent domain because it's like, no, we're buying you out. We're taking ownership of Brightline. Don't worry, you'll be compensated, but we're owning it because we're not going to sit here and allow for a company that's primary focus is on profit first and then humanity second, because that's what corporations require, is the profit first. So what we're going to do is, because we're the state and we don't need profits, we're actually going to take ownership of it. We're going to allow the employees to unionize, as for state employees to be in a union, and they can negotiate their their working conditions. They can negotiate their wages and all these different things. And it's also going to be more secure for them because you don't necessarily go by the whims of the markets, right? Because just like the bus system doesn't go by the whims of the markets, so this should not be going by the whims of the markets either. Brightline, y'all know you're wrong. You know you're wrong because the way you're treating these workers is out of line. And I got a bone to pick with y'all because you guys just do not know how to treat your workers. And it is quite apparent in this article here. Let me go to this because I am sick and tired of these corporations, these private corporations, trying to strip as much money from their workers, from the people as possible. Let's get into this. This is out of Orlando Weekly. It says Brightline files lawsuit challenging onboard attendance unionizing effort in Florida. So we're continuing this because I talked about this last year, but this lawsuit, it's crazy. It says the lawsuit could delay contract negotiations for the workers' union, which made history on Tuesday in becoming Brightline's first union in Florida. Let's go. Onboard service attendants for the high-speed passenger railroad Brightline of Florida made history earlier this week for becoming the first group of Brightline employees in the state to vote to unionize. The onboard attendants first publicly announced their intent to unionize with the Transport Workers Union last fall to advocate for higher wages, improved job benefits, and taxes for their safety concerns. A lawsuit filed in federal court last month, however, could serve to disrupt or otherwise stall the union's progress in bargaining a union contract with the for-profit rail system, which runs a route from Orlando to Miami and is looking to expand. Let's continue here. This says Brightline has filed this lawsuit when it became clear that they were going to lose the election. It is yet another ridiculous delay tactic that repeats the same arguments rejected by the National Mediation Board last year. That's from the TWU International President, John Samuelson, shared in a statement. It says this is another attempt to thwart the will of the workers, and it will fail. We look forward to negotiating a contract that improves the working conditions and economic security of Brightline workers and their families. So it continues, says the federal court records show that Brightline filed a lawsuit against the National Mediation Board, a governmental body that oversees labor relations in the airline and rail industries, in December, challenging the decision by the agency to allow a union election for the railroad's nearly 100 onboard service attendants to move forward. Says the crux of the fight is that Brightline argues that they do not fall under the jurisdiction of the Railway Labor Act, a federal labor law that grants railroad and airline employees collective bargaining rights, or the National Mediation Board, its enforcing body. Aided by lawyers with union avoidance law firm Littler Middleton, Brightline argued last fall that the union should have filed a petition for a union election through the National Labor Relations Board, a different agency that enforces National Labor Relations Act, covering all other private sector industries instead of the NMB. Essentially, Brightline tried to argue they're not actually a railroad, or at least not a railroad that is under the jurisdiction of the Surface Transportation Board, which Brightline's lawyers argue is a prerequisite to RLA jurisdiction. So essentially, what they're basically trying to say is, look, we don't need to have any unions here. We're good enough as we are. We treat our employees good. So therefore, unionizing really is completely unnecessary. And if you guys are going to try to unionize, you're not doing it the right way through the National Labor Relations Board. You're doing it through another entity. And it's like, what does it matter if it's through another entity or not? The thing is like the workers are trying to unionize because they want to actually be able to wield power so that you don't screw them over. Like, here's the problem. See, this is the problem with these private corporations, right? And I will continue to hold this view that Brightline should be stationalized. It should be at least state-owned. If you're going to operate within the state of Florida, it should be owned by the state. Because the thing is that if you're going to be transporting people, this is public transportation. Public transportation, I like to emphasize, is for the public. It doesn't make any sense for it to be privately owned, right? Because then, when you guys want to, expand or raise the price, then you guys are going to raise the price. And then is it actually going to be good for the people of the state? No. And it's sad because ultimately it's really for the benefit of shareholders. It's not really a public good for the people of the state. Like, for instance, here in Orlando, we have the Lynx bus system, right? It is basically the tri-county transit, right, that we have. And for, Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. So with that being said, it is a public good for people to be able to get around Central Florida. Well, Brightline should also be seen as a public good to be able to get to and from different cities in Florida. But that means it should be taken out of private hands. It should not be in the hands of private corporations, because corporations are just going to squeeze us as much as they possibly can and make it so that we can't necessarily get to where we need to in an efficient way through a rail system. Let's continue. It says the Transport Workers Union, representing about 155,000 workers nationwide, criticized this argument, describing it as a transparent union-busting tactic meant to delay workers' unionization efforts. The union also pointed out that Brightline, a for-profit rail line, has received tens of millions of dollars in federal transit grants, taxpayers' money, designated specifically for railroad. Here is my point. If I pay for you, your ass belongs to me. That means that, look, Brightline is ours. No. No. If that's an institution, that should be in the hands of the state. No, it should not be in the hands of private hands. No. And by the way, if it's in the hands of the state and if it's paid for through taxation, that means that there will be no need for profit seeking, meaning that the ticket prices per passenger would actually be lower, which means that it will be more affordable for Floridians to get to where they need to go throughout the state. And whatever profits that are made, it can be revenue for the state. Why are we putting millions of dollars in the hands for them just to operate this as a private corporation? Like, what good is it doing for us? Is there any other light rail that they're competing with minute state in order to go from, say, Miami to Orlando. You could say, well, they're competing with Amtrak, but Amtrak is not a light rail. So therefore, if that's the only game in town, that's what we call a monopoly. If you're going to have a monopoly, it should be owned by the people. There should never be monopolization when it comes to private ownership. If you're going to have a monopoly, it needs to be owned by the people, period. Point blank, period. And when people, and people want to talk about, oh, well, the free market, this ain't the free market. What other light rail exists that takes you from Orlando to Miami? What other one? Let's continue. Now, it says here, Brightline made a strategically stupid decision in hiring a union-busting law firm, Littler Mendelson, infamous for their anti-labor tactics at Starbucks. It says Brightline, which glommed huge sums of government assistance, is now using taxpayer money to fight the democratic desire of its workers to form a union. The National Mediation Board ruled in favor of the union in November, and thereby rejecting Brightline's argument that they did not fall under their jurisdiction. A mail ballot election began last November, lasting through Tuesday, January 14. A vote count revealed that on-board attendance voted 30-17 in favor of unionization, with 36 additional eligible voters sitting the election out. Low voter turnout isn't terribly uncommon in these kinds of elections, as with political elections these days. It is possible the turnout may have been influenced by Brightline's overt opposition to the workers' organizing campaign and potential fear of retaliation. Email communications obtained by Orlando Weekly show that Brightline President Patrick Goddard, based in Miami, emailed employees shortly after the union drive first launched, informing them that he would prefer to maintain a quote-unquote direct relationship with workers without the involvement of a third party. So the thing about somebody like Patrick Goddard, right, is basically he's saying that, well, we don't need a third party. But the thing is, it's like, if you guys actually paid a living wage, right? And gave people what they needed, then you wouldn't have to worry. But unfortunately, they don't get that. So let me share this. Because I just want to give us a little bit of background. So this is Patrick Goddard, the president. Let me enlarge this. It says Patrick Goddard is the president of Brightline, the leading provider of eco-friendly inner-city passenger rail in the United States, connecting city pairs that are too long to drive, too short to fly. In his role, he oversees the company's multi-billion-dollar inner-city passenger rail development and spearheads the hospitality-driven go-to-market strategy, which includes oversight of more than 1.5 million square feet of transit-oriented development. Under his leadership, Brightline successfully completed a $2.7 billion expansion project to Orlando, connecting Central and South Florida. This marketed the reintroduction of inner-city passenger rail in the U.S. after more than a century. During this expansion, Patrick managed the development of Base Camp, a $100 million facility situated in 62 acres of Orlando International Airport property, now the most advanced train maintenance facility in the region. Patrick's primary focus revolves around building a distinctive brand experience that caters to the lifestyle and leisure of both Floridians and visitors, promoting train travel as a convenient alternative to driving. In 2021, as part of Brightline's relaunch, he oversaw the introduction of Brightline Plus, an innovative fast first last mile service designed to address guest mobility needs and provide seamless connectivity to top events and destinations throughout the state. As it says, Goddard has earned recognition as one of Orlando Magazine's Orlando 50 most powerful people. He's been named among South Florida Business Journal's Power Leaders 250 and Florida's Trend 500 most influential leaders. He also holds influential positions in organizations such as the Florida Council of 100 and is a proud graduate leadership of Executive Class 11. Patrick actively serves on the boards of Miami's Downtown Development Authority and FIFA World Cup 2026 Miami Host Committee, and has previously served on the boards Camillus, House of the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance. So he has a background in the hotel industry. He founded and led Trust Hospitality and Ocean Blue Hospitality, both hotel management companies, and specialized in the luxury and boutique hotel sectors after gaining over a decade of experience at Rosewood Hotels, Lowe's Hotels, and Hilton Hotels. And he's Irish. Holds a degree from Business and Hospitality from Trinity College in Dublin. Patrick has been a Florida resident for 2 decades, where he lives with his wife and 2 sons. So essentially, right, it's in the hands of an Irish millionaire. So my thing is, why are we allowing, right, this dude to essentially have this ownership, right, instead of it actually being in the hands of the people? I do not agree that people like this should be headed over public transportation and in a private corporation. You see this. Because that's one thing that I absolutely do not agree with. Let me share this too, because I want to make sure I'm pretty thorough in this. Let's continue on. Now, it says this kind of messaging taken straight from the union busting playbook didn't go over well with the union. If Brightline president Patrick Goddard wanted a brainless wanker, he could have worked with the transport worker in DC to ensure more funding. Instead, he chose the Egypt's way and brutally opposed the worker's voice. That's what Samuelson wrote in a social media post on Twitter. Says a bad boss is an organizer's best friend. Thanks, Patty. Oh my goodness. It says Brightline ran an ugly anti-union, anti-worker campaign against their own workforce, but let's put that behind us. We're committed to working to ensure that the railroad is successful while helping our newest members secure better wages, better working conditions, respect in the workplace, and other goals that they set. So it says U.S. House Representative Darren Soto a constant supporter of organized labor who recently secured $33.7 million in federal transit funds for a Brightline expansion project, also did not immediately respond to requests for comment. It says Orlando State Representative Anna Escamani, a frequent Brightline passenger who recently launched a campaign for Orlando mayor, called on Brightline to knock it off. So Anna Escamani is running for mayor. By the way, just for anybody who knows, Mayor John Buddy Dyer, who is the mayor of Orlando, is not seeking re-election for another term. So she's in the running. And by the way, Orlando is technically a blue city within a red state. Escamani says Brightline should drop any and all efforts to union bust and respect the formation of a union by their workers. As someone who rides Brightline often, I often see how hard their employees work, and their desire to form a union should be celebrated, not delayed. So it says they have benefited from tax breaks, all the more reason to embrace public processing of forming a union and not spend customer dollars on expensive and frivolous litigation. So here's my thing, right? If I were an elected official, I would be calling for eminent domain. Because it's like, no, we're buying you out. We're taking ownership of Brightline. Don't worry, you'll be compensated, but we're owning it. Because we're not going to sit here and allow for a company that's primary focus is on profit first and then humanity second, because that's what corporations require, is the profit first. So what we're going to do is, because we're the state and we don't need profits, we're actually going to take ownership of it. We're going to allow the employees to unionize, for state employees to be in a union, and they can negotiate their working conditions. They can negotiate their, wages and all these different things. And it's also going to be more secure for them, because you don't necessarily go by the whims of the markets, right? Because just like the bus system doesn't go by the whims of the markets, so this should not be going by the whims of the markets either. And so, this is why I said Brightline's on some bullshit, because they're trying to make it so that they do not but they do not consider the needs and desires of their workers. And then on top of that, it's, well, if they're not going by the needs and desires of their workers, then their workers can just quit, which is extremely hard to find a job these days. And then you're just going to lower your wages and give it to somebody else, give the job to somebody else who is more desperate, who is willing to accept the starvation wages that you probably pay. You need to literally make $35 an hour, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Florida. How many of these people are actually making $35 an hour who are working for Brightline? I'm willing to bet probably none. And so this is why it is important. While, I do stand behind unions, I also prefer worker cooperatives, but I think that an institution, a company like Brightline, should be state-owned and operated. If you're going to be operating within the state of Florida, if you're a rail system, public transportation like that, state-owned. Because if I need to get to and from different cities in Florida, what if I'm a worker? If I want to get to different parts of Florida, I shouldn't have to pay through the nose just to be able to get from city to city. And whatever profit or revenue that they do generate should go into the state. So then the state can create revenue, and that can go towards infrastructure projects and things like that we need for the state. But what do I know? I'm just a silly socialist. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.